All right, welcome everyone. Let's get started. My name is Joe Harrison. I am with Mdot State Highway Administration Public Involvement Section. I'll serve as moderator this evening. My job is to try to help the meeting move along as smoothly as possible. So good evening. Welcome to the virtual public meeting for the Maryland 193 Multimodal Shared Streets Pilot Project. Mdot SHA has completed a pilot project to temporarily convert the outside vehicular lanes along Maryland 193 University Boulevard to bicycle lanes. The project, which started in June 2021, ended this past December. The purpose of this meeting is to provide an overview of the data collected during the pilot project, as well as input received from the online survey, which also closed in December. We will also answer written questions about the project that you can submit during the meeting, as well as questions we have already received. We'll talk more about that process in a moment. We do ask that if you are attending the meeting by phone, please remain muted to limit background noise. Let's quickly go over the agenda. We'll have brief opening remarks and introductions, and then we'll have a presentation from the team about the pilot project. At that point, we'll have some housekeeping tips on using this virtual format, and then we'll open it up for written questions. We expect the presentations to last about 40 minutes. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Erica Rigby, who is the district engineer for Mdot SHA District 3, which includes Montgomery County. Erica?
Joe, thank you. Good evening again, everyone. My name is Erica Rigby. I am the district engineer for Mdot SHA District 3, which includes both Prince George's and Montgomery County. I want to thank you all for taking time to join us this evening and to hear about our Maryland 193 bike pilot project and what we've learned from all this. I might also like to ask that if there are any elected officials on the call or present in the meeting with us, that you please make yourself known in the chat. We'd like to, of course, acknowledge you. And from here, I'd like to introduce the project team that we have. So first, we have Mr. Derek Gunn, Deputy District Engineer. Ms. Claudine Myers, Assistant District Engineer for Project Development. Mr. Christopher Bishop, Montgomery County Government and Community Customer Relations Manager. Ms. Aruj Zafar, Project Manager. And Mr. Joseph Mogus, also Project Manager. So now I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and he's going to walk through the presentation with everyone this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Joseph Mogus, Consultant Project Manager for Mdot SHA District 3. Before we begin, I'd like to share a framework for tonight's presentation. As you can see, we will begin with a project overview of the pilot project. Most of these details were shared during the kickoff presentation last spring. The overview will cover the schedule, background, and operational impact. Following that, we'll go over the pilot improvements. At this point, we'll discuss the design and the incremental design changes implemented to address operational concerns. Then we will get to the wealth of data collected during the project. This includes safety, speed, traffic delay, or travel time through the corridor, as well as the EcoCounter's mobile multi. We'll get to the details and specifications associated with this later in the presentation. But just understand that this device was utilized to acquire all multimodal data collection. Multimodal data would mean any non-vehicular travel. Then we will share the survey results. Lastly, I'll offer a summary of all of the information shared tonight. After we take care of a few housekeeping items, we will then open up the meeting for any and all questions. Let's review the pilot project schedule. The EcoCounter devices were installed in early April to begin collecting baseline multimodal data. In an effort to maximize roadway user comfort, we also resurfaced and refreshed all pavement markings along the corridor in late May. The EcoCounter devices were reinstalled shortly thereafter on June 9th. On June 14th, the pilot project bike lanes installation was complete. And on December 3rd, Mdot SHA removed all flex posts, associated siding, and temporary line striping to restore the use of all 3 lanes by vehicular traffic. This context-driven project sought to balance multimodal mobility and access to and from commercial, residential, and recreational centers in Wheaton. Additionally, the demand for and access to outdoor recreational amenities had increased amid COVID restrictions. In response, state and local transportation agencies pursued non-traditional means to service increased pedestrian and bicyclist demand. These changes include temporarily repurposing travel lanes into shared streets to enhance safety and mobility for all roadway users. This particular pilot project sought to improve multimodal connectivity to and from economic and population centers, as well as the Northwood Chesapeake Bay Trail, Slago Creek Trail, Wheaton Forest Local Park, Wheaton Veterans Park, the Wheaton Central Business District, and the Wheaton Metro Station. As you can see in this slide, the subject pilot project spanned from the westernmost point at Amherst Avenue to the easternmost point at Arcola Avenue. This section of Maryland 193 University Boulevard features 5 signalized intersections and 5 unsignalized intersections, as well as several driveway access points. Additionally, we have 15 bus stops operated by both WMATA and Ride-On. Access to all of these existing points were maintained throughout the life of this project. The current roadway configuration is 6 travel lanes throughout the 1.35-mile corridor, and the posted speed limit is 35 miles per hour, with an average daily traffic of 27,900. For anyone that was not in attendance during the kickoff meeting last May, and for everyone's benefit, I just want to take this time to briefly review the scope of the project and restate the initial improvements. Pilot project improvements included reducing the number of vehicular through lanes from 3 lanes to 2 lanes on westbound and eastbound Maryland 193, repurposing travel lanes adjacent to the curbs on westbound and eastbound Maryland 193 for use by bicyclists, modifying the lane assignments on the Arcola Avenue approach to Maryland 193 to connect bicyclists to the Maryland 193 interim bike lanes, installing vertical delineators or flex posts to separate travel lanes from bike lanes, and installing signing and striping within the project limits. Here you'll see an image from the median of Maryland 193 just east of Amherst Avenue looking westerly. You may notice the newly resurfaced and marked roadway as well. Now I'd like to go over some of the changes that took place after initial installation and implementation. Throughout the life of the project, we were continuously conducting field observations to assess performance and find opportunities for improvement. We also received and assessed feedback from motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Following slides aim to show the reasoning behind the design updates and also to show our responsiveness to the associated concerns. Here you'll see the start of the temporary bike lane along Maryland 193 at Amherst Avenue. Please familiarize yourself with the legend on the right of your screen. You'll find that the yellow circles symbolize each flex post. You'll also see the blue box representing the bike lane pavement marking. And you'll see any signing on a given section. You'll notice the buffered bike lane along this section. This was due to the multiple residential and business access points along this stretch of roadway. As mentioned previously, no existing access points were restricted. And again, please find the legend on the right of your screen. You'll find red circles symbolize each new flex post and a new sign. After the initial acclimation period, it was found that the buffered bike lane was being abused along westbound Maryland 193 as a right turn bay or storage lane, along eastbound Maryland 193 as an acceleration lane or a late merge lane. For these reasons, we found that the most appropriate action was to install several additional flex posts to further restrict the use of the short segment from through moves. Additionally, we installed a confirmatory sign along the eastbound Maryland 193 approach for motorists and bicyclists to understand that the segment is indeed a bike lane. In this photograph, you'll see a bicyclist enjoying this section during the earlier months of the pilot project. And just for a moment of levity, you may also notice some geese jaywalking. Some of the practical benefits of the pilot project were reducing the crossing distance for pedestrians, while also lowering the prevailing speed along the corridor. Shifting east, you'll see the section of the temporary bike lane near Reedy Drive. Reedy Drive is a signalized intersection. You'll notice a bus stop on both eastbound and westbound Maryland 193 at this intersection. And again, please find the legend on the right of your screen. There you'll find yield line pavement markings. In the legend, they are highlighted in red just for clarity. You'll find them to be solid white in the actual design. And now you'll find in the legend new bike lane extension pavement markings. Following safety and operations concerns offered by both motorists and pedestrians alike, we found these bicycle lane extension lines to be appropriate. This was applied at all signalized intersections in the corridor, which includes Inwood Avenue and Slago Creek Parkway. Please now find in the legend new bus-only pavement marking. After the initial acclimation period, it was found that the bus access lanes were being abused as either a right turn bay or a bypass lane. For these reasons, we found that the most appropriate action was to install bus-only pavement markings to reinforce the intended purpose of the access point. This was applied at all bus stops along the corridor. Here you'll see an image from westbound Maryland 193, just east of Reedy Drive. You'll see the design improvements previously described. Noteworthy to mention that during the resurfacing prior to implementation of the pilot project, we took that opportunity to upgrade all of the existing crosswalks within the subject section to high visibility or continental crosswalk standards. These upgraded crosswalk markings will serve to improve multimodal safety for pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorists alike. This is a permanent improvement provided to the corridor. In this photograph, you'll see the bus access operating as intended along eastbound Maryland 193 at East Crest Drive. In this photo, you'll see a westbound bicyclist enjoying this section during the earlier months of the pilot project prior to the green bike lane extension line installation. Here you'll see the intersection of the temporary bike lane at Slago Creek Parkway. You'll notice 2 bus stops as well as a signalized intersection. I don't think I need to remind everyone, but just to be sure, we also have the Slago Creek Trail crossing here. I should note that access to Slago Creek Parkway was and still is closed to vehicular traffic from Friday morning to Sunday evening. This worked hand in hand with our Shared Streets pilot project by offering expanded multimodal amenities in and around the Wheaton area. And again, you'll see the addition of bus-only pavement markings. As previously mentioned, the addition of green bicycle lane extension lines was also applied at all signalized intersections in the corridor, which includes Slago Creek Parkway. And you'll also notice the addition of a turning traffic yield to PEDS regulatory sign. This was to address an incident between an eastbound Maryland 193 right turning motorist and an eastbound bicyclist proceeding through the intersection. Here you'll see the Arcola Avenue approach to the Maryland 193 temporary bike lane. And now you'll find in a legend to your right that orange circles symbolize each drum. You'll also find a lane shift sign, a left turn only lane assignment sign, as well as a type 3 barricade. The initial design called for the covering or bagging of the affected overhead lane assignment sign. The initial design also included the installation of a type 3 barricade reinforcing the channelized right turn lane closure. You'll find in the legend that in lieu of type 3 barricade, we are showing composite barrier. You'll also find a shared left-right lane assignment sign. Immediately after the initial implementation, local cyclists asked that we revise the barricade to allow for bicyclist passage. We found it reasonable to accommodate this request by staggering 3 composite barricades. This improvement does not and did not alter the motorist restriction. In lieu of covering or bagging the affected overhead lane sign, our great partners at the Montgomery County Department of Transportation, or MCDOT, offered to replace it with a modified option lane sign. In this photograph, you'll see a group or family of bicyclists enjoying this section of the temporary bike lane along westbound Maryland 193, starting from Arcola Avenue. You may also notice the staggered barricades previously mentioned. It's very important that we take a moment to thank our Mdot SHA District 3 Maintenance Office. Our maintenance shops were responsible for installing, maintaining, and removing all of the traffic control devices described tonight. I can't thank them enough for working day and night through weekends to get this project installed so quickly and efficiently. During the pilot project, we did experience some storm events that left quite a bit of foliage and debris in the curb lane. We mobilized our maintenance shops to assist in clearing the roadway of these impediments. As an example of the hard work that goes into the maintenance shop's role, please appreciate that this work was done largely by hand and shovel. Once again, I just want to say thank you to our Mdot SHA District 3 Maintenance Office and crews. Let's now get into data collection and methodology. Now, before we get into the heart of the matter, I want to set the stage for each data set. As you can see, we have 4 sets to review. First, we have safety. We'll review total safety data associated with the subject section of Maryland 193, followed by a breakdown of injury data and multimodal or non-motorist data. Secondly, we have speed. We will review speed data collected along the subject section of Maryland 193, broken down by the eastbound and westbound directions. Then we will review traffic delay. This section will indicate any motorist mobility impacts through the corridor. And lastly, we have eco-counter mobile multi. Similar to safety and speed, we will further break this data down into both directions and modes. We will review bicyclist data and then multimodal data. To be clear, multimodal means all non-motors. In this case, that would mean everyone on the sidewalk and the pilot bike lane. So here you'll find a chart reflecting safety data spanning from 2017 to 2021. As you can see from the red trend line, the subject corridor is experiencing a downward trend in total crashes. This is obviously a positive indicator. As shown in the legend to the right, the portion of 2021 data in blue represents incidents occurring prior to the project implementation. Similarly, the portion of 2021 data in green represents incidents occurring after the project demobilization. While total safety data is important to understand the performance of a roadway, a more focused view would be injury safety data. So here you'll find a chart reflecting injury safety data spanning from 2017 to 2021. As you can see from the red trend line, the subject corridor is experiencing a similar downward trend in crashes resulting in injury. This is also a positive indicator. As shown previously in the legend to the right, the portion of 2021 data in blue represents incidents occurring prior to the project implementation, and the portion of 2021 data in green represents incidents occurring after the project demobilization. And here you'll find a chart reflecting multimodal safety data spanning from 2017 to 2021. As you can see from the red trend line, the subject corridor is also experiencing a downward trend in multimodal crashes. While this is a positive trend, any non-zero number is considered unacceptable. Our Vision Zero goals, working in concert with our context-driven guidelines, aim to achieve just that. This now brings us to speed data. As shown in this slide title, the method of data collection for this project was a standard spot speed study. Ideally, we would want spot speed studies to collect 100 unique data points for each approach. We were happy to note that we did surpass that benchmark. And here are the results for westbound Maryland 193. The posted speed limit is 35 miles per hour, shown in green. The average speed was found to be 39 miles per hour. The median speed was found to be 38 miles per hour. And the percent enforceable, shown in red, was found to be 6%. This is considered an excellent result. And here are the results for eastbound Maryland 193. Posted speed limit again is 35 miles per hour, shown in green. The average speed was found to be 41 miles per hour. The median speed was found to be 39 miles per hour. And the percent enforceable, shown in red, was found to be 16%. There is room for improvement with respect to excessive speeding in the eastbound direction. As stated during the kickoff meeting last year, signals were optimized throughout the corridor to improve mobility and accommodate bicycle clearance times. All red clearances were modified on June 13th, 2021. And offset changes at Inwood Avenue were also found to be necessary due to lower travel speeds and slightly longer platoons on Maryland 193. Operations along the Arcola Avenue approach were significantly improved after a defective signal detection camera was found and replaced 2 days later on June 15th. I'd like to take this time to thank our partners at MCDOT for executing all of these improvements. So here we have our first travel time data set. I'd like to take this time to carefully go over all of the features before you. The x-axis, or the bottom of the slide, represents all 24 hours of a day, starting and ending at midnight. The y-axis, or the left side of the slide, represents travel time measured in minutes. As a point of reference, a travel time of 1.9 minutes through the 1.35 mile corridor would essentially reflect free flow speeds of approximately 43 miles per hour. A travel time of 2.5 minutes would reflect free flow speeds of approximately 32 miles per hour. A travel time of 3.1 minutes would reflect free flow speeds of approximately 26 miles per hour. The solid line represents figures from March 2021, pre-pilot figures, if you will. The dotted line reflects figures from October 2021, during the pilot project. That being said, let's take a look at the chart's findings. Please note again that we are looking at data associated with eastbound Maryland 193 weekdays. You can see an identifiable, albeit minor, increase in travel time in the corridor during the AM and PM peaks at around 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. respectively. As you can see indicated by the orange arrows, the impacts indicate an average increase of roughly 15 seconds. And here we have data associated with westbound Maryland 193 weekdays. You can see another minor increase in travel time in the corridor during the AM and PM peaks at around 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. respectively. As you can see indicated by the orange arrows, the impacts indicate an average increase of roughly 15 seconds. And this chart is just a combination of the eastbound and westbound Maryland 193 weekday approaches. This is a good way to aggregate data and understand any trends. Eastbound Maryland 193 is represented in blue. Westbound Maryland 193 is represented in red. We can confirm minimal impacts during the AM and PM peaks during weekdays. And here we have data associated with eastbound Maryland 193 weekends. You can see no increase in travel time in the corridor. In fact, one could observe minor improvements during the evening hours after 8 p.m. Similarly, we have data associated with westbound Maryland 193 weekends. Once again, you can see no patterned increase in travel time in the corridor. One could observe minor improvements after 9 a.m. This chart is just a combination of the eastbound and westbound Maryland 193 weekend approaches. Eastbound Maryland 193 is represented in blue. Westbound Maryland 193 is represented in red. We can confirm minimal improvement along the corridor during weekends. In order to truly understand trends in trip generation, we had to think outside of our typical toolbox. We needed to continuously collect multimodal data. So we looked to a company called EcoCounter, which specializes in just that. Among their suite of devices, the Mobile Multi was found to be most appropriate. We may use EcoCounters and Mobile Multi interchangeably. As you can see in this photograph, one EcoCounter was installed along westbound Maryland 193 near Westchester Drive. Another was installed along eastbound Maryland 193 near Slago Creek Parkway. The Mobile Multi was utilized to count pedestrians on the sidewalk and cyclists on the adjacent roadway. Mobile multi-counters are able to separately detect and count pedestrians and cyclists. The EcoCounter's pyroelectric sensor detects pedestrians along the sidewalk and gives reliable trends. These sensors utilize passive infrared pyroelectric technology. The EcoCounter's tube sensors, with their proprietary algorithm, detect cyclists with over 97% accuracy. These pneumatic tubes utilize piezoelectric technology. This device does have limitations. If and when the EcoCounter gets struck or jostled, it needs to be readjusted and calibrated. The EcoCounter also does not distinguish pedestrians from any other mode along the sidewalk, meaning bicyclists that may have operated along the sidewalk before or during the pilot project would be included in sidewalk data. And lastly, the pneumatic tube needed additional calibration to eliminate all motorist data. During the project, it was reported that motorists observed bicyclists abusing the EcoCounter by looping or circling around the device to overcount. In order to avoid any anomalies or aberrations, we will rely on trends as opposed to peaks. And to simplify things further, we ultimately intend to look at an average of eastbound and westbound Maryland 193 trends to understand the overall characteristics of the roadway and the performance of the pilot project as a whole. So here we have our first EcoCounter data set. Please note that we are looking at data associated with eastbound Maryland 193 ridership. Once again, I'd like to take this time to carefully go over all of the chart features. The x-axis, or the bottom of the slide, represents every day from April 8 to November 4, 2021, when the EcoCounters were scheduled to be removed. The y-axis, or the left side of the slide, represents bicycle ridership per day. As a point of reference, the green vertical line indicates when the bike lane was constructed on June 14, 2021. As a reminder, the EcoCounter's tubes were removed from May 24 to around June 9, 2021 to avoid resurfacing work. The black line is the bicycle ridership data set. The red line is the relevant trend line. The horizontal orange line indicates the asymptote or trendline peak. The blue arrow indicates the difference between this point on the trend line and the pre-pilot bicyclist volume. This chart shows the peak new bicyclist daily trips generated to be around 35. And now we are looking at data associated with Westbound Maryland 193 ridership. Just to restate, the green vertical line indicates when the bike lane was constructed on June 14th, 2021. And as a reminder, the eco counters tubes were removed from May 24th to around June 9th, 2021 to avoid resurfacing work. The black line is the bicycle ridership data set. The red line is the relevant trend line. The horizontal orange line indicates the asymptote or trend line peak. The blue arrow indicates the difference between this point on the trend line and the pre-pilot bicyclist volumes. This chart shows the peak new bicyclist daily trips generated to be around 45. So here we have our first total eco counter data set. Please note that we are looking at data associated with Eastbound Maryland 193 multimodal volumes. Once again, I'd like to take this time to carefully go over all of the chart features. The x-axis, or the bottom of the slide, represents every day from April 8th to November 4th, 2021, when the eco counters were scheduled to be removed. The y-axis, or the left side of the slide, represents total multimodal volume per day. This means all sidewalk users and bicycle ridership. Just to restate, the green vertical line indicates when the bike lane was constructed on June 14th, 2021. As a reminder, the eco counters tubes were removed from May 24th to around June 9th, 2021 to avoid resurfacing work. The black line is the total multimodal volume data set. The red line is the relevant trend line. The horizontal orange line indicates the asymptote or trend line peak. The blue arrow indicates the difference between this point on the trend line and the pre-pilot multimodal volume. This chart shows the peak new multimodal daily trips generated to be around 25. Please note that we are now looking at data associated with Westbound Maryland 193 multimodal volume. The black line is the total multimodal volume data set. The red line is the relevant trend line. The horizontal orange line indicates the asymptote or trend line peak. The blue arrow indicates the difference between this point on the trend line and the pre-pilot multimodal volume. This chart shows the peak new multimodal daily trips generated to be around 50. Let us now begin reviewing Mdot SHA's Shared Streets Pilot Project survey. Our survey was conducted on the project portal page for 2 weeks, from December 3rd to 17th, 2021. A total of 807 individuals participated in the formal survey. A series of 10 questions were asked. 1. I live within how many miles of the pilot bike lane project? 2. Have you ever used the pilot bike lane project, the pilot bike lane on Maryland 193 University Boulevard in Wheaton? 3. Why have you chosen to not use the pilot bike lane? 4. How often have you used the pilot bike lane? 5. How would you rate your experience? 6. How do you typically travel on Maryland 193 between Amherst Avenue and Arcola Avenue in Wheaton? 7. Being a local traveler or non-local commuter, how would you rate your experience traveling near the pilot bike lane? 8. Why did you rate your experience as submitted above? 9. Why have you chosen to not use the pilot bike lane on Maryland 193? And 10, do you have any other feedback you want to share about the pilot bike lane project? I'd like to go over the survey results as clearly as possible with some simple pie charts. I live within how many miles of the pilot bike lane project? Among the 807 participants, we found that 60.9% live within a mile of the pilot project. 34.8% live between 1 and 5 miles away, and 4.3% live 5 or more miles away. 12 participants did not answer. It's safe to say that the vast majority, or 95.7% of the respondents, live within 5 miles of the project. Have you ever used the pilot bike lane on Maryland 193 University Boulevard between Amherst Avenue and Arcola Avenue in Wheaton? Among the 807 participants, we found that 18.7% have used the pilot bike lane. 81.3% stated that they have never used the pilot bike lane. 3 participants did not answer. Why have you chosen to not use the pilot bike lane on Maryland 193 University Boulevard between Amherst Avenue and Arcola Avenue in Wheaton? Among the 81.3% of participants that stated that they have never used the pilot bike lane, we found the following reasons. Please note that each selection is not mutually exclusive, meaning multiple selections were available per participant survey. 45.8% indicated that they don't ride. 26.8% indicated that the pilot project feels unsafe. 6% indicated that the pilot project was not close to my retail or business trip. 3% indicated that it was not close to my home. 2.7% indicated that it was not long enough, and 15.7% selected other. The results find that the majority of individuals that opted not to use the pilot bike lanes do not ride and or feel it to be unsafe. How often have you used the pilot bike lane on Maryland 193 University Boulevard between Amherst Avenue and Arcola Avenue in Wheaton? Among the 18.7% of participants that stated that they have used the pilot bike lane, we found that 45.6% use it monthly, 40.3% ride weekly, while 14.1% ride daily. 2 participants did not answer. How would you rate your experience using the pilot bike lane? Among the same 18.7% of participants that stated that they have used the pilot bike lane, we found that 61.6% strongly liked it, 19.9% liked it, and 3.3% were neutral. 6% disliked it, and 9.3% strongly disliked it. How do you typically travel on Maryland 193 University Boulevard between Amherst Avenue and Arcola Avenue in Wheaton? Among all participants, we found that 85.6% typically use a car for local travel, while 3.1% use a car for non-local travel. 7.7% typically travel by bike. 2.1% walk, and 1.5% travel by bus. 3 participants did not answer. Being a local traveler or non-local commuter, how would you rate your experience traveling near the pilot bike lane? The blue pie chart on the left represents all participants that typically travel by car, both local and non-local. These motorists total 713, or 88.7% of all participants. Among this group, we further break them down into the pie chart to the right. We found the following. 61.3% strongly disliked traveling near the pilot bike lane. 19.1% disliked traveling near the pilot bike lane. 4.2% were neutral, while 4.3% liked traveling near the pilot bike lane, and 11.1% strongly liked traveling near the pilot bike lane. So we just went through quite a bit of data, and I just want to summarize those findings that we just reviewed. We'll start with the safety data. We found a 5-year downward trend in total accidents, injury accidents, and multimodal accidents. These are all positive indicators. Then we reviewed motorist operations. We found average speeds to be 41 miles per hour and 39 miles per hour for eastbound and westbound Maryland 193, respectively. We found travel times through the corridor to indicate a nominal change. We did note minor increases during the weekday AM and PM peaks of about 15 seconds. Then we reviewed eco-counter data. We found the following peak new daily bicyclist trips: 35 along eastbound Maryland 193 and 45 along westbound Maryland 193. This came to an average of 40 peak new daily bicyclist trips. Then let's look at total multimodal trips. We found the following peak new daily users: 25 along eastbound Maryland 193 and 50 along westbound Maryland 193. This came to an average of about 40 peak new daily multimodal users. And last but not least, let's go over the survey data. A total of 807 individuals participated in the formal survey. Here are the findings. When asked, I live within how many miles of the pilot project? 60.9% said 0 to 1 mile. 34.8% indicated 1 to 5 miles. And 4.3% indicated 5 or more miles away. Question 2. Have you ever used the pilot bike lane on Maryland 193? 81% said no, while 18.7% said yes. Number 3. Why have you chosen to not use the pilot bike lane? 45.8% said don't ride, while 26.8% indicated feels unsafe. Question 4. How often have you used the pilot bike lane? 45.6% indicated monthly, 40.3% indicated weekly, while 14.1% said daily. Question 5. How would you rate your experience using the pilot bike lane? 61.6% said strongly liked, 19.9% said liked, 6% disliked, while 9.3% strongly disliked. Question 6. How do you typically travel on Maryland 193 University Boulevard between Amherst Avenue and Arcola Avenue in Wheaton? 88.7% indicated passenger vehicle, while 7.7% said bike, 2.1% said walk, and 1.5% indicated bus. Question 7. Being a local traveler or non-local commuter, how would you rate your experience traveling near the pilot bike lane? 61.3% said strongly dislike, 19.1% said disliked, 4.3% liked, and 11.1% strongly liked. We at Mdot SHA would like to take this time to thank everyone for their support and cooperation in making what has turned out to be an exciting new pilot program, such a remarkable success. This has been a great step forward in our progress to better understand how to safely weave in improved bicycle accessibility into our roadway system. As shared in this presentation, the feedback from the local community was largely in opposition, citing, among other things, added confusion around conflict points. A frequent frustration relates to right-turning movement operations. As you may have seen recently reported in the Bethesda Beat magazine, many people did not feel that the lanes were safe for motorists, bicyclists, or pedestrians. The eco-counter data indicated low bicycle ridership as well. While the project proved safe statistically and provided efficient mobility for all users, significant indicators such as right-turning safety concerns, low bicycle lane ridership, as well as strong negative community feedback do not lead us to support the construction of a permanent bike lane at this location. A similar project may be possible in the future if safety concerns can be properly addressed at conflict points along with greater community consensus. We are, of course, grateful for the lessons learned. As intended, this project was invaluable for Mdot SHA with respect to data collection and public feedback. Troves of data such as this allow us to make better and more informed decisions for future bike lane projects. We have also added some new technologies into our toolbox, which will prove fruitful moving forward. Additional permanent improvements for multimodal users are in the future and part of the Mdot SHA suite of projects in our system. Additional opportunities for pilot facilities at other locations will be implemented by Mdot SHA in collaboration with both the bicycle advocates as well as the local residential and business communities where it is safe and mutually beneficial. In the future, we will be sure to improve advanced communications and gauge interest with communities before moving forward with projects such as this. That being said, we would like to ask the public for their input. Where would you like to see this program applied next? Please send your request via email to shamd193bikelanes@mdot.maryland.gov. That's shamd193bikelanes@mdot.maryland.gov. And that wraps up my portion of the presentation. This time, I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention. As promised, I did walk, run, and ride along the corridor many times during the life of this project. It was a pleasure meeting so many of you and listening to your concerns while managing this project. I'd like to thank our transit partners at WMATA and Ride-On for their patience and assistance. I must also send a big thank you to our partners at MCDOT for their cooperation. We'll get to questions and comments shortly, but first we need to handle a few housekeeping items. So now I'll pass the presentation along to Aruj. Aruj?
Thank you, Joe. This is Aruj. At this time, I'm going to go over the Title VI requirements. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 ensures that people, regardless of the race, color, or national origin, receive equal treatment, equal access, and equal rights. This means that everyone must receive equal opportunities without regard to their race, color, national origin, specifically to Mdot SHA programs and activities. For further information, you can contact our Title VI manager for Mdot SHA. Her name is Tamala Lun, and she can be reached at an email address at TL unn@mdot.maryland.gov. Her phone number is 410-545-0325. With this, I'm going to pass the presentation back to Joe Harrison.
Thank you, Aruj. Before we move to questions, let's take 2 minutes to talk about meeting logistics. Terry Maxwell is with Mdot SHA Public Involvement. Terry?
Thanks, Joe. And thank you to our attendees for joining this evening online and on the phone. I'd like to cover a few quick tips on how you can participate tonight. As Joe noted, all participants will remain muted throughout the meeting to help with background noise. We will have several ways for you to provide input during and after the meeting. One way to do this, when we open for questions and comments, online users can use the Q&A box to type in your question or comment. To locate the Q&A, please look on the right side of your screen, likely toward the bottom, to locate a box where you can type a question. With many attendees tonight, the Q&A box will be helpful in tracking the comments and questions coming in and will help our moderator direct them to our panel of project team members. Users have the choice to post their question or comment anonymously by checking the provided box. You may also find some helpful information posted in the Q&A box, such as the project website and the contact information. Next slide, please. Another way to provide input for those using the call-in option only and who do not have access to the Q&A box is to visit the online comment form on our project webpage after the meeting so we can make sure we receive your comments and concerns as well. To get to the online comment form, go to roads.maryland.gov and click on to access the Maryland 193 Shared Streets project listed under District 3, Montgomery County in Mdot SHA's project portal. We will share this comment form location information again throughout the meeting. So thank you, and at this point, I'll turn it back to Joe.
Thank you, Terry. Let's now move on to questions and answers. On the project webpage, known as the project portal, we received a number of questions and comments. The comments largely mirror the survey results that we covered earlier, so we won't cover them now. We did receive some questions which were submitted for tonight's meeting. We'll cover some of those first. In the meantime, we encourage everyone attending now to submit your questions in the Q&A box. Now, I will note and thank everyone who have already submitted questions. We've received many. And many of the questions submitted were entered before the presentation, and the answers were covered by the PowerPoint presentation. In the interest of time, we won't repeat some of those questions where the points were covered in the presentation. Likewise, quite a few questions share the same theme, so we'll try to cover those themes by combining some of those questions. The whole point here is that we're going to try our best to get to as many questions tonight as possible. There are several, we're going to, as I mentioned, start with the pre-submitted questions. We received a total of 8. I'm going to raise several of them right now. The first one, did Mdot SHA monitor the increase in Arcola Avenue traffic during the pilot? Did Mdot SHA monitor the collateral impact on other roads or road segments in the area, such as Arcola Avenue between Kent Mill and Georgia and Kent Mill between Arcola and Randolph? What about so the question is asking about the monitoring the traffic along Arcola and in some of the adjoining roads. Can anyone who would like to answer that question?
I'll take that one, Joe. This is Joe Mogis again. As mentioned during the pre-construction meeting, MDOT SHA committed to monitoring and optimizing signal timing along the subject corridor throughout the life of the project. Operations along Arcola Avenue approach were significantly improved after the defective signal detection camera was found and replaced 2 days after implementation on June 15th. We found signal performance and corridor performance impacts to be nominal. The western limits of the travel time shared earlier in the presentation include up to Maryland 97 Georgia Avenue. As far as potential impacts upstream into adjacent intersections well within Montgomery County right-of-way, we did not include in our study. This was relayed during the pre-construction meeting. We did, however, work closely with MCDOT to ensure that we worked hand in glove during every step. Prior to implementation, we received confirmation from MCDOT that signal operations on Arcola Avenue at Lamberton Drive were functioning properly. We did not receive any concerns from MCDOT regarding Arcola Avenue, and we would defer to them for any constructive observations moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question that was submitted prior to the meeting. Those of us who drove by the bike lanes every day saw very low usage. Most commonly, the lanes were empty. The positive aspects of the lanes were slower traffic on University Boulevard and more pedestrian separation from traffic. Couldn't we get the same benefits by turning the right lane to a bus-only lane rather than a bus and bike lane? Who would like to take that question? Basically, the question is asking about the possibility of, rather than a bus and bike lane, what about a bus only lane?
I can take that one as well. I can say that on behalf of MDOT SHA, that discussions and coordination are ongoing with our partners at MCDOT's Ride-On and also with WMATA for transit improvements, state and county-wide. So, you know, all options are on the table for the future. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Have fire and police departments weighed in on the effect on emergency service as they relate to reduced lane access? And what was their response? Okay. So did we coordinate with fire and police, and what was their response?
Sure. So as mentioned during the pre-construction meeting, we had spoken with Arcola Health and Rehabilitation Center, the administrator for the Arcola Health and Rehabilitation Center, located on the northeast corner of the Maryland 193 at Arcola Avenue signalized intersection. We discussed the forthcoming changes, operational impacts, as well as the benefits. Among the topics discussed were emergency vehicle operations and route. Following that conversation, she had expressed excitement for this project and confirmed that she had no operational concerns for emergency vehicles. Further, we have kept the lines of communication open for any potential concerns in the future, and we did not receive any communications thereafter that would indicate any change to this finding. Further, no access points were closed or restricted, and we did not receive any complaints or concerns from law enforcement or fire department.
Okay, thank you. Final pre-submitted question: why was the project duration extended? Who would like to take that?
Oh, this is Derek. I think I can take a shot at that one. So the project, which I think Joe did a very nice job of summarizing, was a pilot project that always had a 6-month duration or an out implementation of 6 months. So we monitored during that time, and we saw some of those changes that Joe mentioned. And when the project did wrap up in December, that's when we kind of took a step back, and even earlier than that, and started assessing some of the data and some of the inputs that we were receiving. So this was a pilot project with a 6-month duration. And again, just kind of gauging some of those successes and some of those lessons learned from that 6-month stretch.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking again in the Q&A box. I noticed that we have several elected officials who are in attendance, and I'm sorry if I missed anyone, but I did notice State Senator Kramer, Delegate Charkoudian, Delegate Stewart, Delegate Carr, and again, I apologize if I've missed anyone, but we're glad you're here. All right, let's. I'm going through. We're going to skip through the go through the Q&A questions. Try to get to as many as we can. Again, I'm going to try to avoid duplicate questions, as well as those who were those that had answers answered in the presentation. First question here, we have a senior citizen writer. Would you consider setting up the bike path and the bike path that was removed when they were going to build the purple line? And I'm sorry, I'm not sure about that one. Next question has to do with we have a person who is has posted a link in the Q&A section about a petition against bringing back the lane. So if you're interested in that, I suggest you check out that link. Let's talk about the here's a question. Are you giving more weight to the input from those of us who were most directly impacted by the project? I'm all for bike and ped safety, but I observed rare use of the lanes and experienced safety concerns and inconvenience as a result of the project. So let's pose the question this way to the panel. How was the survey results used by Mdot SHA at the conclusion of this pilot project? Who would like to address that?
This is Erica. I can address that. What we'd like to say is we use the feedback as part of the pilot. So this entire process was an opportunity to try something new and innovative and to collect data to determine potential future uses. So the survey information is also information that we will use going forward for various decision-making processes. So we appreciate everyone's comments and input, and we will be using that moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
So Joe, I'll turn it back.
Thanks. Here's a question that has to do with safety. And it's a long question, but I'll read parts of it. When examining safety, how did DOT assess close calls where a pedestrian or bicyclist was nearly hit by an entering car? How does DOT assess the impact on safety from traffic diverting across neighborhood roads to avoid worsening traffic on the University Boulevard? So what about the issue of safety, and how did Mdot SHA analyze and assess the safety issues? Who would like to take that?
I think I'll take that. So that's a two-pronged question. One is, how does Mdot SHA document or take into account impacts outside of our right-of-way? And the other is, how do we document or quantify near misses? So I'll start with the latter. Mdot SHA, we wouldn't be able to document or quantify near misses. However, we do always receive complaints or concerns through our online CCMS system, as well as we do field observations and full traffic studies to assess the existing conditions to see if there are any deficiencies or room for improvement. Now, to the first question, does Mdot SHA assess or review impacts well outside of our right-of-way? The answer is kind of gray. So we do care about impacts outside of our right-of-way that are directly related to our changes, our improvements or modifications. We do work in concert with MCDOT. MCDOT is actually contracted by Mdot SHA to manage our signal system. So there is close coordination inherent in our system. So if there are any concerns about impacts outside of Mdot SHA, as it relates to our projects into other counties or other right-of-way, we would hear it either through MCDOT or directly through our CTMS system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Question, it sounds like a suggestion about a similar, will there be a similar project considered for Connecticut Avenue and Chevy Chase or Rockville Pike near Pike and Rose? If not, why not? So to the panel, is there a possibility of similar projects like this one in the future in other parts of the county, other communities? Who can take that question? The idea
This is
of
Erica.
Yeah, Erica, thank you.
Or Derek, would you like to speak on that?
Sure, Erica, thank you. Well, that's a fantastic question, and it's one that Joe kind of touched on during his presentation. We are looking for opportunities to implement different pilot projects or permanent installations around the county and around the state. And I think this kind of goes back to the previous couple of questions in terms of public interfacing and getting some of that feedback and making sure that we have consensus on those locations that we would move forward with first. But at the same point, we do want to make it very clear that putting in improvements that support and protect our vulnerable users, that's a utmost goal for SHA. So again, we would be looking for user feedback on that, where the program would kind of bear out to next, and which corridors we should be looking at.
Thank you, Derek.
Okay,
Can I just add one thing to that? I just want to say that MDOT SHA will not be the sole decision maker. As mentioned during the presentation, we are asking the public for their input. So you let us know where you would like to see this program applied next. And you could send that via email to our SHA MD193 bike lanes at mdot.maryland.gov email address, which is on the project portal page and distributed previously through our postcards. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's a question, and it mentions that my wife, daughter, and I love the bike lane and hope it comes back permanently for the full length of University Boulevard. I know Joe, you talked about it in the and very clear about it in toward the end of your presentation, but I think it bears repeating. What is our conclusion as far as this pilot and the possibility of, or our determination about making this a permanent feature along this stretch of University Boulevard?
So, while the project did prove safe, statistically, there were indicators that would not lead us to support a permanent application. Low bicycle ridership was one, but also community feedback, which was strongly negative. So for those reasons, we can't support a permanent construction at this time. However, if we can address safety concerns of the local residents and get a greater community consensus, we may be able to reconsider. But that,
Okay.
At a later date.
Okay, thank you. Here's a question about traffic. How did the analysis account for the pandemic impacted reduction in traffic on Arcola Avenue to University Boulevard as compared to pre-pandemic and reasonably expected post-pandemic resumption of traffic levels? So as far as traffic analysis, how do we handle that, and recognizing that the pandemic made that analysis more complicated?
Well, I'm sorry to jump in. I would say that I can't acknowledge post-pandemic as a concept just yet. There were waves pre-Omicron, pre-Delta. There was a wave of people going back out onto the roadway. However, none of those factors would work in concert with our project. So if we had less vehicular traffic, we would have higher speeds and more of a safety concern. We actually worked to improve speeds along the corridor. So I would say that in spite of COVID and those dynamic factors, the project was a success as far as traffic and safety is concerned. Thanks.
Thank you. Here's a question about pedestrians. And it reads in part, did MDOT SHA, study the effect on pedestrians of the pilot bike lanes? And so I posed that to the panel. Excuse me. What was our assessment of how pedestrians were affected by the shared streets pilot project here?
Well, I can say that pedestrians did enjoy an additional buffer from the motoring public, which is an absolute benefit. I could say, or one could say, that pedestrian volumes did not increase significantly during the life of this project, but from an engineering standpoint, pedestrian level of comfort significantly increased. Thank you.
Okay. Question, was speeding a problem along University? And was it a problem to begin with? Was there a speeding problem prior to the pilot? And how did we notice the rate of speed affected by the pilot project? Who would like to address that?
I'm sorry for hogging the microphone here. Somebody else?
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. I just want to say that, as I mentioned during the presentation, the average motor speeds on Maryland 193 were 39 and 41 miles per hour, and the posted speed limit is 35. So as far as speed is concerned, the project was a success, and we did lower the speed limit to 30 miles per hour when applying the context-driven guidelines a year or more, 2 or so years ago. So the speed limit was reduced when we applied our context-driven guidelines, which improved safety along the corridor. And I believe, by the data shown today, our project proved successful in making sure that the speed did not increase. Thank you. If anybody else wants to add anything, feel free.
Okay. All right, thank you. Here's a question about, can you detail when the project was first communicated to those who live in the area of Maryland 193 and who were affected by the bike lanes? I don't recall any flyers sent to homes. I had to search after the lanes were implemented. So the question is about outreach for the project, particularly early on. Who can address that point about project public outreach?
Joe, I'll touch base briefly on that, and I'll open it up to others on the panel if they have information as well. We know that members of our traffic team, sort of in the beginning of the pandemic, midst of the pandemic, did meet with community advocates, bike lane advocates, and other members of the community as we conceived the project. And we did work extensively in terms of the tools that we had available to us to reach the public as best as we could. The pandemic prevented us from having public meetings. We did meet virtually with some citizen groups, and we did put up a project portal page, which many of you have used and accessed to get information about the project. We did send out many mailers, thousands of mailers to addresses within the project footprint. And we also posted all the information, including those mailers, to our project portal page. So we'll continue to refine our communication processes and involving the public as far as our outreach is concerned. But again, against the backdrop of the pandemic, we do have some lessons learned, and we'll apply these going forward as we always continue to improve our communications with the community as far as our projects are concerned. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add on that?
Okay, thank you. What was the, I'm looking at several questions that raise the issue of safety. Here's one that says in part, removing a lane shifts traffic into the two remaining lanes, increasing traffic as measured by the number of motor vehicles per lane. This will inevitably cause unnecessary increase the number of accidents on 193 when there are many other options for recreational biking. So the issue of safety, what was our, what did we see? What did the pilot project tell us about safety, and if and how the pilot project affected safety for motorists and pedestrian bicyclists? What about the safety issue? What do we see?
So as presented tonight, safety indicators are all trending positively, meaning safety data is showing a decline in incidents. So I disagree that there's any indication of a negative net effect from the project, and I think everything is moving in a positive fashion, at least in the last 5 years that we have presented before the audience today. I do appreciate the idea of the question, which is increasing motorist density would naturally increase some certain types of crashes. But in this case, we have found that to not be the case because we couple that with lower prevailing speeds. So in principle, I understand, but that did not bear out in the data. So, anybody else wants to add anything? Feel free.
And Joe, thank you. And what I would say is that I think some of the genesis of this project and the pilot project was to look at some of that safety piece and to look at some of those components on a multimodal level. Like Joe mentioned a little bit earlier, with that added buffer, the pedestrian level of comfort did improve along the corridor. And as he cited, travel time and also speeds along the remaining 4 lanes went a little bit down from where they had been, or they were level. So those are all indicators that even with a reduced cross section of 4 lanes, that the corridor was able to support some of those attributes that we were looking for, which is good.
Okay, thank you. Question here about the proximity. The questioners or the questioner wrote, 193 at Arcola shows the proximity of the elder care home to University Boulevard. This is a facility which understandably requires periodic emergency care, ambulances. The experienced effect of removing the right turn lane to 193 included traffic backups during the light at Lamberton Drive. Did the study consider the life safety hazard by making more difficult for Wheaton rescue and fire vehicles to travel along Arcola? So it's a question about fire and medical responses. Let's talk about that coordination and what we concluded.
Let me jump in there. So I was a part of this project from the onset, and I did include Montgomery County Police at every phase of this project. I'll also add, as I previously mentioned, that I did directly contact and speak with the administrator of the Arcola Health and Rehabilitation Center, which is located at the intersection of 193 and Arcola Avenue. And we received no concerns or pushback from either the medical facility or fire department or police department. And we certainly would want to accommodate any requirements from any first responders or medical facilities, and we did not get any concern from those parties. So we did take those precautions. We did proactively contact those parties, and we did not receive any concerns from those parties. So thank you.
Thank you. Another questioner said, I used the bike lane during the project pilot, but it wasn't terribly useful because it didn't go very far. if the bike lane is permanently implemented, I think we've covered here that there are no plans to do that here. Are there plans for it to go all the way to Four Corners or beyond? The bottom line, I think, from this question is to the panel, how were the questioner said the bike lane needed to be extended, needed to be longer, and which I guess begs the question, how were the boundaries of the pilot project arrived at? And why don't we just, it's a good question. How did we come up with the boundaries for the this pilot project?
Okay, that's a loaded question because there's a couple more questions in there. So we did select the Maryland 193 corridor because we found that we had a capacity analysis that did prove that we could take a lane in both directions and not significantly impact operations. That analysis bore out in the data and in motorist experience. Perhaps not in peak hours, but overall, it was a correct assessment. The specific corridor that we selected, which is the bounds of Arcola Avenue and Amherst Avenue, I'll start with Amherst Avenue. We could have conceivably established a farther western limit, perhaps to George Avenue or Veers Mill, but for obvious reasons, we have geometric constraints when you proceed west of Amherst Avenue. You have metered parking along the corridor, you have a multitude of access points, and you also have the Maryland 97 intersection, which is much too, I would say, voluminous, and we already have geometric constraints as far as turning movements are concerned. So it did not seem feasible to go west of Amherst Avenue, and it turned out that that was the appropriate decision. As far as the eastern limit, we chose Arcola Avenue as opposed to Slago Creek Parkway, much to the chagrin of many local residents, because westbound 193, the rightmost lane of westbound 193 needed to not be a conflict with the terminus of the bike lane. So in order to do that, we happily found an intersection that had a right turn only except for buses at Arcola Avenue. And the major modification we made there was twofold. One, restrict through movements on the rightmost lane for buses and restrict the channelized right turn for the motoring public along southbound Arcola Avenue. So that is the reason why we selected the two termini. And additionally, this was a pilot project, so we needed to scope the project appropriately so as not to expand too far. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Joe. I'm seeing three questions which focus on traffic at Arcola. And the question was, how was the data measured, and what was the data on the backup at Arcola? So in general terms, as far as Arcola and University was a major focus by folks, major source of concern. What was our takeaway in terms of how that intersection operated during the course of the pilot project?
So as I mentioned in the presentation, we did find a defective signal detection camera at Arcola Avenue, and we found that that was the reason why southbound right turning motorists were frustrated, and we did have that fixed on June 15th, which was 2 days after implementation. So we actually found that to improve operations on Arcola Avenue quite significantly. Now, I understand that they did have a channelized right turn taken away from them temporarily, but signal detection improvements actually proved to improve the signal operation significantly. So anything upstream beyond the intersection of 193 at Arcola, we would respectfully defer to MCDOT, but we have not heard MCDOT offer any significant impacts that we needed to address. So if anybody wants to add anything, please jump in.
Okay, thank you. Another questioner said, my family is directly impacted by anything that happens on this section of University Boulevard. She mentions that we drive, walk, bike, take buses, and we loved having the bike lanes that made it possible to move more safely in any mode and safely cross. Now here's a question about sort of a broader picture. How do the university, or how do the university bike lanes contribute to the larger network in Montgomery County? Does it fulfill a specific gap or make a specific connection between needed locations? So in terms of how the pilot project, how these bike lanes fit into the larger network picture in Montgomery County. Can anyone talk about that in general terms?
Hi, Joe. I can touch on that question. This is Claudine.
Okay.
For this particular location, there were several trails in the area. Slago Creek Trail, the Chesapeake Trail, as well as several parks and recreational facilities. And so as far as the connection, this particular pilot project allowed access to those facilities. The county is proposing a bicycle lane on Amherst Avenue and to some of the parks that are in that area. And this allowed residents and who wanted to travel along University Boulevard, who were unable to get there, and their families, access to those parks as well. So as far as network, we thought this selection of this location really complemented all the various parks and trails that were already in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's a question. There was a weekly food collection activity at Northwoods High School that resulted in long lines on the side heading towards Wheaton in the evenings. Could this have been responsible for the decrease in speed during the evenings? Presumably, these events would not take place post-pandemic. As far as the speed measurements that were taken, could we again summarize what we learned as far as how the pilot project affected speeds along University?
So I'll take that. To the first point, a spot speed study would not be conducted when there's any unusual activities nearby. A spot speed study would also not utilize any motorists associated with a queue, first and foremost. So that would be motorists in free flow, one per platoon at most. So there would be no impact to any speed analysis or study with respect to any queuing or line at an intersection. The presentation itself, we already did cite average speeds to be average speeds along the corridor to be not enforceable. So it would be less than 10 over the posted speed limit. We did find that eastbound was slightly faster than westbound, and there was a room for improvement there. But overall, we found the project to be quite successful as far as speed is concerned. Anybody wants to add anything to that, please feel free.
Okay, thank you. Here's another questioner. A questioner talks about signage. And I'd love for any future efforts to have signage for helping awareness, especially to let pedestrians and wheelchair users know they can use it. I told people with walkers a few times they should feel free to use the better surface. Now, let's talk about a little bit about signage, because I think we did make some adjustments with signage during the course of the pilot project, and also about how pedestrians should or should not use the bike lanes.
Okay, I certainly would like to tackle that one. So pedestrians were not permitted to use the pilot bike lane. Pedestrians were not to make any changes operationally at all with respect to this project. Pedestrians were to remain on the sidewalk, enjoy the buffer, and perhaps enjoy less bicyclists on the sidewalk. As far as signage, we always are open to suggestions, any particular resident's experience walking or biking through the corridor. We could certainly modify our designs in the future with supplemental signs or confirmatory signs along the corridor. But again, I want to stress, these pilot bike lanes are not for pedestrians or anyone on wheelchairs or anything else to utilize the bike lanes. If you were on the sidewalk, with an exception of bicyclists, you should have remained on the sidewalk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Here's a questioner who expressed great disappointment that the, and I'm filling in a blank here, but it sounds like expressing disappointment that the pilot project, the decision was made to that the pilot project will not be made a permanent feature at this location. What about, let's again reiterate, what is MDOT SHA's position or feeling about similar type projects in the future? Is this something that MDOT SHA is continuing to consider and potentially pursue elsewhere?
So
who would like to address that?
This is Joe once again. I'm so sorry. I just want to stress that this project was always intended to be a temporary bike lane. It was clearly stated at the onset that this was a pilot project for a temporary bike lane. Every single piece of outreach articulated that this was a temporary bike lane in a pilot project. As far as where and if the next project would occur, as I stated previously, we would encourage all residents and commuters to tell us where you would like to see the next pilot project and send those emails to SHA MD193 bike lanes at mdot.maryland.gov. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's a question about sidewalks and sort of questioning the safety. What will DOT do to make it safe for people, especially wheelchairs, to navigate along University Boulevard outside of cars? And the sidewalks are unsafe, too narrow, and blocked by vegetation and other barriers. They are not ADA compliant. Who can talk about the sidewalks along the stretch of University and the issue of ADA compliance and that sort of thing?
Hi, Joe. I can take that question. This is Aruj. We did see that most of the corridor within the project limit is ADA compliant. And we do plan to work with MDOT SHA maintenance personnel and our Montgomery County DOT partners to clear the sidewalks and remove any overgrown vegetation that might be there. And if there are any areas that you observe that need immediate attention, I encourage you to submit a service ticket using the MDOT SHA Customer Care Management System, the CCMS. And we can also provide a link in the chat how to access the CCMS. If anyone else would like to add.
I just want to add one detail in regards to our partners at MCDOT. They do have a forthcoming cycle track project, which is still under design, but that project, I believe Claudine mentioned previously, is at Amherst Avenue. And with that project, the pedestrian ramps and signals will be brought back up to ADA standards. So that is another improvement all the way at the terminus. So thank you.
Thank you. We have time for a couple of more. Here is a question from, and it's very long. I'll try to make it concise, but have the planners of the bike lanes consulted the local bike racing community to better understand cycling and real-world pragmatic bicycle infrastructure. Much of the discussions about the lanes seems to have not been done with the understanding of real day-to-day bicycle riding across all ability and needs of the cyclists. What about the design of the lanes? How did we come up with the design of the pilot bicycle lanes?
So we worked in close coordination with local bicyclists and pedestrian activists and enthusiasts, and we did decide that a whole lane on both sides of Eastbound and Westbound Maryland 193 were appropriate for the pilot project. And we installed vertical delineators or flex posts along the corridor, and wherever there were tapers, we maintained 5-foot gaps on both sides, which is per typical bike lanes along Mdot SHA roadways. As far as the commenter having issues or concerns regarding the design, please feel free to share those concerns via email to the Mdot SHA bike lane project email address, and we're happy to look into it in further detail and perhaps incorporate them into our future design. Thank you.
Okay, I'm seeing a couple of more questions about pedestrian safety and how that needs to be improved. And here's another question about community outreach that we had no information until someone came across a sign posted on the adjacent park path. I think it was mentioned here that one lesson learned was that we, Mdot SHA, need to do a better job with outreach early in a project like this, and that would improve understanding and potentially support. So again, that's why we do pilot projects, and we identify lessons and try to learn from them. Okay, we're toward the end of we're approaching 8 o'clock, and we're going to conclude questions and answers, and we're going to move to closing comments. Once again, questions may still be submitted to Mdot SHA staff through the project portal page, which is located on the Mdot website. That address is in the Q&A box, but it can be reached at www.rosemaryland.gov. I'd now like to call upon Erica Rigby and Joe Mogus to wrap us up. Erica?
Hey, Joe. Again, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us this evening to take time to hear our presentation and also to hear some more information about the feedback we've received from community citizens and elected officials. Again, I just want to make sure to thank all the elected officials who joined us this evening. So Senator Kramer, Delegate Charkoudian, Delegate Solomon, Delegate Carr, and also Delegate Stewart. We appreciate you partnering with us on these and various other opportunities to make improvements along state roadways. So I just want to say thank you again to everyone who's joined us this evening. And of course, for our project manager who has done such an amazing job in terms of working through this project and the research and the data. Joe, I will let you have the final words.
Thank you, Erica. I guess I just want to say thank you all very deeply. I did, like I said, I did walk, run, and ride along the corridor with many of you, and it was quite enjoyable. I bought my first bike during this project, and I learned about my design and the local residents during this project, and I thought it was quite successful, and I really learned a lot about local residents' feedback, and we will improve outreach efforts in the future, and we hope you enjoyed it. And thank you all for coming out tonight and listening to our presentation, and thank you very much.
Okay, at this point, we will adjourn. I'd like to thank everyone for participating. So please be safe and good night.